Between the politicians and the screenwriters.
A very big early hit was political.
I was quite enamoured by how good looking some of this.
And quite established, quite politics with a P.
But what people had really revelled in was seeing politicians squirm.
Absolutely.
And it has to take you into places that are normally closed to the average punter.
You were lucky enough to do something on the expenses scandal for on a BBC production.
That's right, yeah.
How did you approach it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the story is told from the viewpoint of a woman called Heather Brooke, who's the Freedom of Information campaigner, who basically fought for years to get this information out. And then, this is all part of the story, and ultimately didn't get the credit when the Telegraph bought the story. I had a conversation with her quite early on in the genesis of the project, and I said to her that what struck me most about the whole expenses saga was not really, despite sort of rumblings at the time about this, that how it hadn't actually changed the political culture one iota, but what people had really revelled in was seeing politicians squirm, which I think is very instructive about the expenses saga itself, but also the state of British politics and its relationship to its public. And from that point of view, it seemed to me that the film just had to be had to capture that rather than be a kind of serious, kind of heavyweight. We didn't have much time anyway. It's quite a short film because of the limitations on production time, etc. That it had to capture that sense of almost re-engaging people in politics, if you excuse my French, by taking the piss, you know. And that was very strongly kind of the sort of the tonal beginning. I mean, in reality, Heather and this character and the speaker Michael Martin never met. So they're at loggerheads throughout the story, and that's another element. The structure is basically very much that kind of ping pong sort of. You know, you do this, but physically they're not close together. So it's very much a sort of, from that point of view, it's quite a challenging piece because you have to play the drama out without the protagonist in virtually every scene. So that was another big factor in doing it.
What's the tone of the piece?
Well,
Well,
the tone of the piece is, I suppose, there's sort of twin tones to it because of the nature of it, because of its structure, and I suppose, in a sense, what I've been talking about the kind of comic element of it is that's played out really at in the political forum with the speaker and his cronies, for want of a better word, fumbling with this kind of idea of transparency and what's expected of them, and their kind of. You know, if we're talking about for people who've been in the House of Commons for 30 years, they're sort of blinkered. It's this classic trope about they just don't get it, which you hear constantly in reference to the expenses saga. And there's something terribly kind of funny and terribly British in that idea, you know, in the idea of the incompetent politician. It's, you know, I'm sure that people have been talking about the West Wing a lot today, or if they haven't, they will be, and if they haven't, they'll want to.
The Simpsons have come up.
The Simpsons a lot on the West Wing, but the thing about the West Wing that always struck me as being, why doesn't, it's a very well done show, and there's many things to praise about it, but why I don't think it really would work if it was made over here is that it's predicated on the idea of political competence, and that's something that I just don't think the British public buy into anymore, if they ever did. And I think some of the expenses scandal has simply just crystallised that.
Well, it's the same with sport. I mean, you'll have
absolutely.
David Jones, Calamity Jones.
Yes, yeah.
He'll scoop more headlines than a
exactly
competent League Two player.
That's true. That's true. But I suppose for some reason, we lionise footballers for the some of them. Goalkeepers particularly have that problem, but other footballers tend to get lionised for what the things that the few seconds of a game when they actually do achieve something. In politics, it's just, we seem to, I don't know whether there was a disassociation of sensibility, whether it used to be the case, or whether the British have always been pretty cynical about politicians. But I think politicians, now that of course, you know, as we can progressively see more and more of them at work on a 24-hour news basis, of course, the law of incompetence, you know, takes over. You know, and unfortunately, you know, I mean, and the classic example of that is the current Prime Minister, who, of course, when he was in the shadows, was possibly the greatest Prime Minister we've never had, and now that we see him in the daylight, a lot of people think he's probably the worst Prime Minister we've ever had. So you know, the actual the cost of revealing yourself is possibly fatal.